Hey there, I'm David Barefoot, and this is the Holy Shyft podcast. Hey, so we're going to pick up where we left off from last week. So if you didn't get to see last week, I believe it's episode number 11. You'll definitely want to go back and listen to that. It's kind of a lead into what we're covering. They'll work in concert together, and it always rests upon this concept of the Holy Shyft. And so just to remind you, the concept of holy, that word means other than, special, set apart. It's the intended best. I like to say the true you, the intended you that already exists, by the way. It's not something you're trying to achieve. It already exists. And when you understand that, you work from victory instead of chasing something that's on the horizon that you never reach. It's the only way to truly be at peace. The word peace means, the word shalom, the origin of that word means nothing missing, nothing broken, complete. So the complete version of you that has nothing missing, nothing broken already exists. You're made in the image of God. This is not about your faith. Let's just say that the creator of all things created you in his image. And that version of you is the intended version. So there's this holy, set apart, intended you in any moment and every moment. And then there's the option to align with it or not. Hence the word shift. And shift is spelled with a Y here at Holy Shyft because we want to be reminded there's a choice, there's a fork in the road. The less than default outcomes of this world, which suck usually, or are at least less than, versus the intended, set apart, special outcome. And then the why is also there to remind you that the person that is responsible, the only person that can take full responsibility for it being shifted or not, is you. So last week we talked about visiting times where you felt tight, where you felt anxious, where you felt limited in your creativity, and where you were very reactionary in a meeting, for work, for business, leading people, sales opportunity, whatever, any business setting you think of that involves other people, or with your loved one, husband, wife, significant other, your kids, especially as a place, because they mean so much to you, just like your spouse, or even a family member or dear friend. Those kinds of examples. We asked you to remember a time where you felt tight, anxious, and we discussed the fact that it comes from being in fight or flight, which may have taken you by surprise because you wouldn't think that being with your husband or wife would cause you to be in fight or flight for most scenarios. I realize some people are in heightened relationships where there's verbal or physical abuse or whatever. In business, you wouldn't expect walking into a meeting and being in fight or flight unless you have a really volatile situation at work. Those encounters, or even with other people, even getting with a friend. However, what we covered when you go back to it is the ways that subtly our mind sends messages to the tissues in our brain that tell our brain it should go into protection mode and go into fight or flight, which results in a narrowed focus and tightness. So what does this chronic condition look like? This condition of being in a new normal, new as in it wasn't what you were built for, where you're constantly in a subtle state of fight or flight. And I would have you consider one of the biggest contributors is your active participation in avoidance. Avoid, A-V-O-I-D, avoid. Where do you avoid things? Where do you avoid discomfort? Avoid conflict. Avoid intersecting and colliding with something that isn't working in your life. Where? How often? Listen, take a breath. Don't go into fight or flight and get tight on me. I'm inviting you. Let's just shift for the moment. So literally, I'm going to invite you. Just take a deep breath through your nose and hold it for a second. And now exhale. Let's do another one. And this time, actively choose to let go when you exhale. Breathe in and exhale. You do that 3 times. We're just going to do it 2 to honor your time here. But you literally change the biochemistry in your body. Nasal breathing instead of short breaths through your mouth, send a message to your brain that we're safe. So that one little piece can help you shift out of that tightness and anxiousness. But what we're going to do, so keep that, if you've got a piece of paper close to you, write it down. Or just for fun, take off your watch right now and put it in your hand and hold it. And every time you start to feel tight, that watch, just let it remind you that you need to breathe through your nose. You're safe. These topics we're touching on, lean into them. And so that what we're looking at is avoidance and what you are avoiding. And by the way, you wouldn't be doing it consciously. So for me, I spent years avoiding the fact that how my wife and I communicated, which I talked about in the last podcast, was creating separation when it's the exact opposite of what we wanted. So there was 2 things. I was avoiding how I show up, and I was avoiding the fact that I was blaming her. What's wrong when you blame somebody? You give up complete control. That'll be a separate podcast we'll cover. But when I go into blame, I become a victim. I surrender control to something and give it power that's not intended. The only thing I should be surrendered to is the true version of me and the creator that created me. That's it. When I'm surrendered to that, I instantly shift. I instantly am in my true full power, full peace, and therefore there's joy no matter how tough things are. And the world needs me to be in that place. My wife needs me to hold space when there are no answers, when I don't know what to do. It comforts her to know that I know we're going to be okay no matter what. And she can feel safe. She can be a mess. And it becomes this safe space. When I can do that in a meeting with the teams that I lead and the people that I work with, and I can send a message that, hey, things are going wrong, but we're going to be fine. Let's breathe. And when we do, we open up. So that requires, in this avoidance concept, that it requires us to not avoid the fact that something's going wrong. We've got to call it out. So I'd have you consider you have certain areas you are not willing to admit that it is fucked up. I needed to get your attention. It's avoiding saying it just that way. And for those of you who it would go against your morals or your faith, maybe you need to shake it up. Maybe you need to wake up because your avoidance is killing you in the way you're intended to show up. And it's killing the relationships that need you to thrive. You're not reflecting the glory of God when you're avoiding. And so we have to move from avoidance to awareness. I promise you, if you want to be a superhero, we're having t-shirts made up. Awareness is a superpower. My superpower over the last couple of years has become awareness. I celebrate awareness. Dude, man or woman, I'm going to use the word dude. Come on, imagine if you were just celebrating being aware about anything that isn't working, anything you aren't happy about. It's a little sucky because now you got to see it for what it is. But you also enter into this space of hope and freedom. Here's the issue with avoidance. Avoidance leads to lack of hope. And lack of hope is the source of stuck. And stuck sucks. We're going to go through that again. Avoiding admitting something is off, not right, not in its intended vibrational frequency. It sucks. It's not good. Avoiding saying this is not good leads to a lack of hope. And lack of hope which hope, the original use of the word, not the current version of the word. Current version in our modern Western civilization is, I wish. You can almost replace hope with wish. I wish it would come true. But the belief is it might and it might not. Would you agree? Just pause and think about it. Your definition of hope, likely given to you by the world is, I'm hoping because I don't know whether it'll happen or not. But the original definition of that word and intention of that word was confident expectation of good. So I go, if I'm avoiding, acknowledging something's wrong, then my confident expectation of good goes down. As it goes down, I get stuck. As I get stuck, life sucks because I don't show up as the true me. I'm not able to be responsive. I'm reactionary. I'm in a subtle state of fight or flight, operating from my amygdala, not tapping into the hippocampus and the wisdom state of my brain, where all the synapses of and matrices of memories and learning experiences and all those things are available. Instead, I'm in that tight fight or flight focus space. I know that's a little repetitive from last week, last episode, but just want to tie all this together. This avoidance, awareness versus avoidance, the first answer to getting out of avoidance is just be aware that you're avoiding something. And I want to invite you to lay down your religion for a moment. If you call yourself a Christian, a non-denominational Christian, a Catholic, a Pentecostal, if you call yourself if you consider yourself, I apologize. If you consider yourself, if you're Jewish, if you consider yourself Muslim or Buddhist or whatever, take whatever that is and lay it down for a moment. I'm not asking you to adopt what I'm saying as truth for you. I'm asking you to consider it for application in your life. And you come back and lay it over whatever you need to make sure you're being in integrity with your faith. I am going to use principles from the Bible. And before I do, I want to say that if you're Muslim or Buddhist, I'm taking principles that are age-old and have been used for millennia, just like you can take amazing words of wisdom from the source books of each of the other religions. And I have. There's beautiful, brilliant truths in there. So for now, we're not talking about the religion of it. We're talking about just the truths that are documented. And I'm going to use the Bible. So for those who are Jewish and Christian in faith, it's going to be a little easier for you. But still, I'm asking you to lay it down. And let's just look at this as a book of wisdom, let's say, with secrets about how to live a shifted life. So now we're back on this avoidance versus awareness, and awareness unlocking by us acknowledging things are wrong. I want you to see that you're invited to do that in the words of wisdom in the Bible. In Philippians 4, it says, rejoice. It actually repeats it. It says, let me say it again, rejoice. It says, let your non-self-interest, or gentleness is another way it says it, be evident to all. In other words, let it be on the outside, how you show up, that you're not freaking out and so totally focused on you, which is that tight fight or flight state of being. Let the peaceful, powerful you show up. So let the non-self-focused you, the surrendered you show up, because you know the Lord is near. So because you know that you're safe, let's put it that way, to be you, the you you're meant to be. And then it goes on to say, do not be anxious about anything. It says, but in all things, in this case, all things particularly that you are avoiding, that you're afraid to admit. Because it goes on to say, present those things to God with thanksgiving. Get it out. Talk about it. It says, pray and petition. Pray is a conversation with the true you, with God. What sucks? What's going on here? What am I avoiding? Have that conversation. And it also says petition, which means ask for what you want. how do you know what you want if you don't first admit what's wrong? So using my wife and I's example, I longed for the intimacy that we experienced in falling in love. I didn't think I knew that God put this woman in my life. I saw the completed version of her, the true her, and I believe she saw the true me, and we celebrated it for like 6 months. That's all we showed up as. It was just a time in life that was this amazing gift. We were not those people yet. I mean, we were. Obviously, it's the true us, but we had a bunch of shit that needed to be chipped away. If you've ever heard David's Michelangelo's take on David when they talked about the big granite that he chiseled the statue of David out of, he referred to it as simply him chipping away the rock to reveal what was already there. So we both got to see the sculpted version of us that God created, but then we had to spend another 10 or years or so after that, after our first couple of years of honeymoon stage, having that stone chipped away, and it was painful. And to the degree I avoided, it just prolonged the process. What I longed for was to be in oneness with her and enjoy that best friend, safest place on earth connection that we had, longed for, wanted. But all my avoidance started to take that and make it something that was farther and farther away. So much so that both of us started to have questions of whether this thing would even work. We were literally on our way to divorce, even though it's the last thing we would ever want. My avoidance almost crushed my marriage. My avoidance of fear in business prevented me from seeing a ceiling I was creating. Every business that I started would have this radical early stage of success. And then I'd come to what we all encounter when we're trying to grow and build something. I'd come to the first stages of challenge and I'd have this awareness and certainty and hope that I could overcome it. And I would. But then in that second round, I'd start to get nervous and play safe. I'd stop seeking counsel. I'd stop admitting, or I'd start avoiding. I'd start avoiding facing my limitations, avoiding the fact that I needed somebody else because I have limits. I have my strengths and my weaknesses. And in every case, business after business, success, I'm thankful. Had tons of failures, but tons of successes. But every single one of them capped out until I got in touch with this concept of avoidance, acknowledging what I'm avoiding so that I can see it for what it is and become aware. With that awareness superpower, all of a sudden I come out of fight or flight and I have the references now to draw from that remind me in the business example that I just need to get a coach. I need to get somebody in my game that can help me work through what I don't know how to get through. I don't know what I don't know. Or in the relationship piece, I'm able to lean in and tell my wife, I wish I knew why I get tight like this. I'm sorry, babe. I want connection with you. And the moment I do that, she melts. It changes everything. We talked last time about Tom Hopkins and his stimulus response only being possible, us taking stimulus and responding instead of reacting, which is simply making the holy shift and being in our shifted state, responding instead of reacting. And the only way to really do that under fire is to have practiced before we come under fire. He called it PDR, practice, drill, rehearse. So for today, the invitation is for you to turn avoidance into awareness. Make awareness your superpower. I would have you consider carrying a notepad with you or set up in your phone. Find your notes app and go in there and create one that you just keep a rolling note of every time you recognize a place you're avoiding and become aware and celebrate it. You want to go to the next level with that awareness? Have the guts to rejoice that you're aware because you know you're moving towards freedom. You're making the shift. And you're taking your focus off of you and what's wrong with you. And you're instead going, this isn't in alignment with the best that's intended for me. And now as you take your focus off you and acknowledge that there's a power stronger than you, and now you deal with how that works for you. For me, that's God. I can't unfeel or unsee what I've seen. I have too many examples that defy logic of simply surrendering and experiencing this energy, this peace, this inside out connection with a power greater than anything I have ever encountered. Your logic, the greatest theologians in the world, the greatest scientists in the world, nobody could ever convince me or torture me enough to get me to deny what I've encountered. And now I've encountered it over and over again. I'm not talking about sitting in church with your hands held high, worshiping, and that can be beautiful. I'm not talking about your practice of religion, because I did that for years and I was still avoiding, and I was still living an unshifted existence more often than not in this malaise of a hidden fight or flight existence. What I'm talking about only comes when you stop avoiding, move into awareness, face the shit, talk about what you're disgusted about, and then all of a sudden you encounter the oneness I'm talking about with a power. You either find out it's not real and it doesn't exist. It's part of the reason why you're avoiding. You're afraid of finding out that there is no one, no help, and that you're just screwed. What do you have to lose? If you actually acknowledge what you're afraid of and what you're avoiding and cry out and wait, I promise you, you will experience this feeling of freedom and possibility. That is God. That is hope. That is confident expectation of good. And from there, in that awareness, you can move into a shifted state, come out of fight or flight, and show up more flexible, able to respond. You'll see the fruits of your effort. If you do it over and over again, that fruit will really start to bud, and you'll have reinforcement after reinforcement of this shifted state, and start to enjoy new breakthroughs in your marriage, no matter how dead it was, because you're changing. You're not needing her or him to change. You'll experience new breakthrough with your kids because they'll start to feel safe around you and know that there's a safe space. They'll feel an energy. In business, you will rise. You will be the change. So I'm excited for you. Get in touch with what you're avoiding. Move into this awareness as a superpower. And we'll continue to talk about how to then go from there and live this shifted life where you align with this wholly other than set apart, better version, the true you. Somebody you know needs to hear this. Do us a favor. Do the world a favor. Tell them about the Holy Shyft podcast. Remind them it's spelled with a Y. If they look up the Holy Shyft podcast on Spotify or on Apple or other podcast platforms, or go to the YouTube channel where you can watch it and see the video as well as the audio. Give us feedback. Give us a like. Subscribe to the channel so you can follow the episodes. And again, we appreciate you sharing it, but we really love feedback to know what you'd like to hear more of, what you liked, what you didn't like, so that we can continue to bring value. It's what we're called to do. We're going to keep doing it. Excited about you taking the journey with us. Until the next episode, I'm David Barefoot, and this is the Holy Shyft Podcast.